Welcome to the spotlight, it's time to ignite. Kubefirst got the tools that make your dev life bright. From zero to GitOps in a flash of light. Watch your dreams take flight on the starry night. Step into the future with just a single click. Automation magic, it's all in the mix. No more waiting around, no more developer tricks. Kubefirst keeps it real, we're here to fix. Kubefirst project spotlight, lighting up your dreams. With GitOps power flowing like electric streams. Tune into the brilliance where innovation beams. Kubefirst project spotlight, hear the fan screams.
Do you have John?
I do have your
audio.
Are we good?
It's just Steve.
It's Steve.
Are we good
Steve,
now?
I heard a rumor that if you lose all audio, you have to leave and come back.
Can you hear me?
I heard him.
Oh, there he is.
All right. Let's start that again. So before we begin, you guys introduce yourselves and your roles in the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm John Dietz. I'm one of the two co-founders. I running as CEO. And I'm here with my other co-founder, Jared Edwards. Jared, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Sorry, real quick. I have a audio playing back through. Do you guys have that as well?
I only have you.
No.
Okay. I can hear John's response still playing, and there's okay. Anyways, I'm Jared. Well, the other co-founder of Kubefirst. I think it was my turn to say hello. Joining from Denver, Colorado. I've been working on the Kubefirst project for a little over 5.5 years now, and in the cloud native space for almost going on a decade.
So before we start with the demo, what inspired the creation of Kubefirst?
Ooh, Kubefirst started way back. So Jared and I met at our first Kubernetes project, and we had to start Kubernetes just like everybody does. You know nothing. You have been working in an environment that has certain expectations, and then Kubernetes comes in with a different set of opinions, and you have to learn the ropes, and it's tough to learn the ropes. It took Jared and I about a year or so to build our first cloud native platform. And at the end of it, we were like, we had gone through a whole bunch of cloud native tech that we liked, a bunch of cloud native tech that we didn't like, that we never wanted to touch again. And sort of going through that evolution of understanding how to build a platform, you end up with just like these tools that work really well together, that integrate really well together. And if you construct it correctly, you can get them all in a single state. And we were like, it just shouldn't take that long to recreate this type of an open source platform. So Jared went off and he went to another job, and I went off and went to another job as well. And we both thought that we'd be able to build the same approximate stack pretty easily, pretty swiftly. And we were shocked that it still took forever, because you have to argue about ingress controllers and where you're going to keep your secrets and what cloud you're going to run in and what you're going to do for CI and CD and infrastructure as code governance and blah, blah, blah. There's just a lot of discussion to be had when you're building a platform, an open source platform from scratch. So Jared and I just found that unacceptable, because, while you're building that out for a year, the business is getting no value out of Kubernetes. And we wanted a better way to start cloud native projects where you could be getting value out of Kubernetes on day one instead of on day 365. So we started working on Kubefirst nights and weekends. Just, can we get this thing to install instantly? An entire company with everything that you need to run and ship software, dev stage prod, run your team, run your infra, run your cloud, run your SaaS app tools, etc. So that was the origin of the project. It was grassroots nights and weekends. Can we do it? And then by the time we got to the conclusion that we can do it, we realized that we were going to need a team to see the rest of the vision through, which meant that we were going to need money. And we started a capital raise that got interrupted by an acquisition that allowed us to have a tiny team for about a year and a half, where we were able to sort of prove out our go-to-market strategy. And then right before we turned on our commercial aspirations, we got acquired one more time just recently by Mark Boost, the CEO of the Sibo Cloud. And so for the last half year, we've been expanding the size of our team and getting ourselves really ready for our commercial venture. And we also introduced a new product called Colony to give ourselves a stronghold in the data center space for hybrid cloud environments and private cloud environments. So yeah, long story. It's been a long journey, but it started from a grassroots movement.
So you've been double acquired, so that pretty much makes you someone like CoreOS now, right? Actually, I think they were triple acquired. So
yeah, one more will be exceptional.
I always ask this question to people around their new projects, right? So how would you describe in one sentence what Kubefirst is for like the first person hearing about it?
I've got an answer. Jared, do you want to give a pitch on Kubefirst, the most ambitious platform in the world, in a single sentence?
I'm gonna need the question one more time. I'm sorry. I'm having a tough time.
The question was describing Kubefirst in a word to somebody unfamiliar with Kubefirst. How do you can this all up in a single?
Yeah, it's just trying to get you up and running with a cloud native platform instead of a Kubernetes cluster. You have a lot of needs and a lot of building to do once you start your Kubernetes journey, and you don't have to do all that hard work anymore. So there's other tools like Kubefirst out there, but we obviously would love for you to use it.
Yeah, I mean, from my pitch, it's basically like we're all using mostly the same stuff. We studied the surveys, we know what the most popular open source free tools are, and we know that we're all using them. We're just trying to fast track the ability to put all those great tools together for free. And we know that it's also a lot of burden to run a cloud native platform. And we think that we can offload the burden of 95% of the work that you have to do as a platform engineer, so that you can take that same role and focus on your software development team instead of, focusing so much of your time on the inner workings of making a secure cloud native platform. I think that we can take the community notion that cloud native has fostered and leverage that community. And we don't need to be 4-person platform engineering teams anymore. We can have this community of 500 platform engineers that have all decided, let's use the same tools the same way and fight the machines together, So yeah, that's basically Kubefirst in a nutshell. Get rid of that 18-month journey to get value out of Kubernetes,
Yeah, so that sounds like your kind of core your core problem that you're trying to solve there. So obviously the company's been going for a while. Like you've been acquired, you've rebranded to Konstruct now. What were some of the key milestones that you had during during the project's evolution?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have some pretty clear ones. When we started the project, it was just like, can we do it mode? And our installer was literally a bash script that went through and would do a whole bunch of Terraform execution and then GitOps wiring and blah blah blah. But that wasn't really the polished product that we knew that we needed. So step one was just getting an installer that was founded on better tech that had more stability about it. And that's truly like the hardest part of Kubefirst is the installation. Once you have the platform runs itself. It's easy. There are so many things that can go bump when you're trying to provision an entire company of infrastructure in a single command, from Terraform providers that don't pull correctly, to not compiling correctly, to not executing correctly, to, some image that you need to pull that suddenly isn't available on GitHub or whatever. So just getting the installer to be bulletproof and ready to go. We re-architected it on Golang. And that's been a nice evolution. We have a CLI installer and a user interface based installer for marketplace ecosystems. And then that was really like the major chunk of work, plus establishing multi-cloud. When we started Kubefirst, we were just an AWS shop. And we knew that we wanted a multi-cloud portable platform where the same platform could be installed in AWS and GCP and Civo and DigitalOcean, Akamai, you name it, wherever you run compute. Because we needed that multi-cloud implementation, we had to make certain decisions, and we had to learn a lot about the differences between the different clouds. But once we had the ability to sort of rinse and repeat to add a cloud, we're at the point now where if we wanted to add another cloud, we could have another cloud added within 2 business days. And sort of working out all those kinks was a very major milestone. And then it was, well, okay, so we've got this great platform. We have a great way to install it. You can install it to all these clouds. We added support for GitHub also. We started out as a GitLab shop. So we have GitHub, GitLab, we have all these different clouds. And then it was, okay, this is a great offering. It's entirely open source. It's entirely free. In a single command, you can have all the best cloud native tech working in whatever cloud you're in instantly. Now the question is, how do we turn this into a business? And that's a really tricky part when you're as GitOps forward as we are and as open source forward as we are. There's not a lot of territory to commercialize, but we found an angle in the user interface where we could give this open source platform for free. And if we could find an avenue to incentivize you to be a commercial user of ours through the user experience of the user interface, then that's going to be the vehicle that we use on the Kubefirst line for commercial users, and to sort of supplement and support that open source initiative that the Kubefirst platform naturally has. And then we're also on the Colony side of the house with our new product line. We're fully commercializing on that line. So that'll also offset some of the engineering cost of running the Kubefirst platform in-house.
Cool. So I have a bunch of questions, and I'm sure others do as well. Should we switch into a demo and I'll ask some questions as we go?
Yeah, let's do. Before we do though, Jared, I have to ask on your AV quality. How are we doing right now, buddy?
We're doing a lot better than we were after I left and came back.
Fantastic. All right, well, yeah, let's get into demo. Picture's worth 1,000 words. I would love to, Steve, if you could let me know whenever you have my Civo dashboard up.
I have the Civo dashboard now.
Fantastic. All right, so what I'm going to show you here, this is our installer process. I'm not going to go through an installation. It takes about a half hour in the Civo cloud to create a new platform. If you're in some of the slower, bigger clouds, like AWS, I think is our worst one. That one takes about an hour to create this cluster. But the cluster creation process is very lightweight on you. I've got sort of the step 1, 2, 3 pre-populated so that you can see how it works. When you do a Kubefirst launch up, you get this nice screen at console.kubefirst.dev. Kubefirst.dev runs on your local host. This is a K3D cluster running on my laptop that we'll install for you. And you basically just have to pick your Git provider, pick your cloud provider. You hit the next button. You have to give us some credentials to get into your GitHub organization that you want to use. And you have to give us your credentials to whichever cloud you want to use. And then you have to make some decisions about the region that you want the management cluster placed, what DNS provider you want to use. If you want to use Cloudflare, we have that as a secondary option across all of our clouds. And that will probably set you up really well for our multi-cloud stories that are on the horizon. And you just give it a name, any old name will do. And you hit create cluster. And when you do that, this magic process starts. This says 15 minutes. It's truly more like 30. So be a little bit patient with it. But excuse me, what this does is this is pulling down our GitOps template from an upstream GitHub repository that we have at Konstruct.io on GitHub. And the GitOps template repository has a bunch of variables in it for your cloud details, your DNS details, your Git credentials and Git details and stuff like that. We take that template down and we hydrate it with the details from that 1, 2, 3 step that I just walked through. And then the end result is after about 30 minutes or so, you'll get a screen that looks just like this that says, hey, you're all set. You have a new cluster in that cloud. And there's a single administrator user in there called KBot. We give you the password to KBot that you can copy, and then you just hop on in to your new cloud. When you hop into your new cloud, it'll look just like this, except without the additional cluster. You'll just have your single management cluster. But you'll be able to use our user interface to add additional clusters. So you could come and click the create cluster button, and you can choose between different types of clusters. So physical cluster is just a cluster that lives in your cloud. Like if you're in AWS, this will be an EKS cluster. If you're in Google Cloud, it'll be a GKE cluster. In Civo, it'll be a Talos or K3S cluster. And you basically just have to specify an environment if you want the cluster to host like a development or staging or production environment. You give it a name. We'll do Spotlight Day.
Whilst you're doing that, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
So when you first booted up your the first screen that essentially allowed me to configure the management cluster. So am I I assume I have to run that somehow locally myself, and then essentially what I'm doing is after I've created that initial UI, I then go in there and create my management cluster. So there is like a chicken and egg, right? I can't create the management cluster before the management cluster, like before I have something.
It's very sharp of you to observe that. Yeah, you're exactly right. We have this concept of cluster zero. Cluster zero is just like, where are you starting from? And that's a tough question because we don't know who you are and what you have. So maybe you have a Minikube cluster. If you do, you can just use that and you can just helm install Kubefirst to that cluster, but you're not installing the platform. You're just installing the installer. And if you don't have a Minikube cluster, you can just download our binary and run Kubefirst launch up, and we'll create that initial cluster zero cluster for you. If you're in a marketplace like DigitalOcean Marketplace or the Civo Marketplace, we can create cluster zeros in those clouds in their marketplaces. So you can just hop into the Civo cloud, and when you create a new Kubernetes cluster, down here at the bottom, you can just click this tile for a Kubefirst cluster, and we'll install the installer for you. So one way or another, we have to get you into a cluster with the installer tools. So you're exactly right. And that's what these screens are that we're looking at here with the 1, 2, 3 step. That's the installer screens. At the conclusion of that installation, you get a nice screen like this, but you're still at kubefirst.dev. You're still on your local host in that cluster
Okay.
0
That makes
instance.
sense.
And then when you hit open the Kubefirst cluster, that changes you to whatever domain you chose. So I chose the domain kubefirst.ai. If you were acme.com, this would be kubefirst.acme.com. And once you're in here, this is like your actual management cluster in your cloud. And all of that old cluster 0 cluster stuff that you had is all removable, disposable. You don't need it anymore. That was just to get you into this ecosystem. Oh, that makes sense, Steve.
Yeah, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. When you go through and create the management cluster, that's storing all of that configuration in the Git repository that you were talking about that we've configured. So essentially, cluster 0 becomes obsolete because the management cluster now already exists in Git. So you can go and reconcile that from anywhere moving forward if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's a fully GitOps ecosystem. And because of that, if we go to applications here, there's a couple things that I should sort of throw on screen. The first is the GitOps repo that we build for you and deliver to whatever GitHub org or GitLab group you specified. So you'll get a repository just like this one when you do a Kubefirst installation. You can see this one's just 14 hours old. And in this repository is a folder called the registry. The registry has a directory for your clusters. And for each one of your clusters, my management cluster is this one called Spotlight here. And you'll see that there's a whole bunch of application YAML files in here that describe how to install tools that you're probably very familiar with, like Argo CD and Atlantis and Cert Manager, Chart Museum, external DNS, Ingress Nginx. We have a whole bunch of usual suspects in here. So the reason that your management cluster got created this way is because of our upstream GitOps template repo. And if you wanted your management cluster to be close to this, but maybe just a little bit different, we allow you to fork that upstream GitOps template repo and make customizations of how your management cluster is created. But for the most part, people typically don't need to change the management cluster because we offer you the opportunity to build workload clusters, and workload clusters can be whatever you want them to be. We start you out with some templates of what we think is like a good idea for a typical workload cluster. We give you a workload physical cluster, a workload virtual cluster that runs in vCluster, which is like a cluster inside your cluster. It's pretty cool. And then in the Civo cloud only, we also have a template for GPU on-demand clusters, which is what this cluster here is, this self-hosted AI. And this is kind of neat. Let me take a quick second to take a look at this. So when you create a cluster in Kubefirst, we're not making calls against your cloud, making API calls saying, hey, Amazon, or hey, Civo, create a cluster for me. Instead, what we're doing is we're building infrastructure as code and writing that infrastructure as code to your GitOps repository. And we have your GitOps repository monitored and managed by Argo CD automatically as part of the install process. So when I hop in here, let me do
So, this UI that we're browsing to now is all on the management cluster, correct?
That is correct. So yeah, when you're looking at this user interface, this is the Kubefirst Pro UI that lives inside your management cluster. And when we're looking at the Argo CD instance of your management ecosystem, that Argo CD instance will be managing your management cluster and it'll automatically manage any clusters that you create through Kubefirst. And I'll show you what that means. So we've got this registry self-hosted AI cluster here. This is the self-hosted AI cluster that I created late last night. And if I hop into how this is constructed, it's got a whole bunch of components. And one of these components is this open web UI that allows you to run self-hosted AI workloads, sort of like ChatGPT, but you can run it all privately in your Civo Cloud account. And it's pretty neat the way it works. If I pull this up on screen, I haven't logged into this yet, so demo gods, please be kind to me on Thanksgiving. And the way that this works, ooh, this is a new user interface. I haven't seen that at all. You have to register yourself, which I will do. I'm John Dietz. And when you create an admin account, basically you get this ChatGPT looking user interface, except that there aren't any AI models automatically provided. So what you have to do is just hop into your admin. They've moved everything around on me again. Admin panel. And if you go to settings, you can go to models and you can pull down models. This used to look a little bit different. Connections.
Classic UI upgrades, right?
Yeah, really.
Right. Anything with the gear icon in the top right?
Maybe.
When you're on that previous screen.
Can I? Oh man, this is brutal. There is a way through there. We apparently just upgraded to their latest version. I don't know how to use their user interface anymore, but there's a way where you can go to the Olama site and just pull any model in, and then when you select that model, you can run chat GPT like prompts directly against your self-hosted private GPU cluster, which if you're in like the government sector or you have privacy concerns and you can't share your proprietary information with a third party, it's a really nice self-hosted way to get that UI experience. And it's all you have to do is say that you want a GPU cluster, give it a name, put it in a region, and then you'll get that same type of experience. You can also create these virtual clusters, which are powered by Loft Labs vCluster technology, which is this really cool way to say that you want a cluster because you need isolation, but you don't want all the overhead of like a full-blown Kubernetes cluster, like the control plane and everything. If all you need is a whole bunch of clusters because you want isolation, like you want to be able to give developers individual environments for them to do, development oriented stuff on their own, and you didn't want to pay for all those additional control planes and all the infrastructure needed to build out a whole new environment. The vCluster implementation is really compelling. It basically builds a control plane inside a cluster that you already have, but it gives you your own kubeconfig. And when you use that kubeconfig and connect to that vCluster, you're in a brand new context cluster and you're in there by yourself. Like you can't escape that cluster space. And you can have as many vClusters in that cluster as you want. So it's a pretty compelling argument. If isolation is the reason that you need a lot of clusters, there's a really good way to save a lot of money and still get that isolation layer.
Where is the vCluster running specifically in this instance? Is it running on the management cluster?
The way that we have it right now, vCluster is always run in your management cluster. We have a story where you'll be able to choose any physical cluster to add that vCluster to, and that's going to create this kind of cluster of clusters architecture that we're not quite ready for from a UI standpoint, but it's very real and it's very much ready to go.
So it's one of the one of the audience members, Shiva, had a question, which was, does Kubefirst automatically take care of updating Terraform provider versions in case of change to the infra?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It does. There's devils in the details. Right now, the way that we're architected is every time you install a management cluster, that's your opportunity to pull in our latest opinions of all of our opinion set. So the way that we create workload clusters, the way we create physical clusters, the way we create GPU clusters, the upgrades of what versions of Argo CD, of Reloader, of the Terraform modules, of what version of EKS you're running on. All of those types of decisions currently come in through a management cluster refresh process. We're working on stories where we'll be able to more atomically just pull down the latest workload template into your existing management cluster. We're just not quite there yet. So the way it works right now is every time you do a refresh of your management cluster, you get to pull in all of our latest opinions. And yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about upgrading Kubernetes any longer, upgrading all of the different platform tools that are on the stack. Those are all things that we go through and keep up to date as we surface new releases to our consumer base.
Yeah, that'll be neat, right? Kubernetes upgrades is a pain in the backside in
Yeah.
some clouds, not all clouds, and I'm not going to throw any under the bus. But if you've
It's
worked
so
with
true.
Cube, you already know the answer.
It's so true. It's so true.
So for viewers following along, like, what prerequisites would they need to be able to try this themselves, right? They obviously need some kind of Git repository, upstream SaaS tool.
Yeah, that's exactly
else?
right.
Yeah.
So if you want the most bare bones, I have nothing and want to make no commitment way to install, we have a K3D version of the platform that can run on your laptop. And it will give you a really good taste of Kubefirst. It's not as good as the cloud ecosystem, and there are some limitations on the local stack. But that's the cheapest, easiest way to get going is just to do a Kubefirst install and then a Kubefirst K3D create. And that this same platform just on your laptop. You'll be on a domain called kubefirst.dev that resolves to your loopback at 127.0.0.1. So when you go to argocd.kubefirst.dev, it actually resolves to your local host and gives you a good like certificate experience and all that kind of stuff. We even, if you expose an ngrok token, we'll even let you do automated infrastructure as code through Atlantis on your laptop, which is pretty cool. But we really recommend that you do the cloud platforms because they're just more robust and more professionally polished and more indicative of what it is that we're trying to sell you. There are 3 prereqs that you have to do any install. You need to have a domain that you can use, and that domain can be in your cloud or in Cloudflare. You need to have a cloud account. We currently support, I think, 7 clouds. We have all of the big 3 covered, AWS, GCP, and Azure. We have Sivo that we support very heavily. DigitalOcean is also super strong. Akamai is in beta and works very well. It has a couple limitations about it. I think we have the same exact story for Vultr. And then if we don't support your cloud, tell us about it and we probably will support your cloud. In the meantime, we have a K3S variation where you can kind of bring your own cloud. You can tell us what IP addresses your nodes are, and we can turn your nodes into a K3S cluster and provision the platform in an unsupported cloud. But basically, it's just like those 3 details. It's your cloud creds, your Git credentials, and your DNS credentials. And that's our prerequisites.
So I want to talk a little bit about community and future vision, but I want to give you guys enough time to show anything else you want to show before we switch gears.
Yeah, 100%. Just to make a quick call out on what was just on my screen. That was, you probably saw there were a whole bunch of apps. Some of them were yellow, some of them were green, and they were kind of going through and installing one after the other. That's what you get with Kubefirst that I want to make sure it doesn't fall flat. Like there's a lot of technologies that can create clusters, cluster API, for example, it can create an empty cluster for you. Creating an empty cluster just isn't hard work. Our clusters are coming with actual applications and clusters that work for your business. So like we don't just install a cluster that has nothing inside it. We install it with automatic connection to Argo CD so that it can be managed by Argo CD. We have cert manager in the cluster, external DNS, external secrets operator, blah, blah, blah. The reason that you have all of these tools in there is because of these templates that we give you, but you're also allowed to change what these templates are. So right now we say that we're going to install, for example, Ingress Nginx here. And Ingress Nginx is going to have a destination of whatever your cluster name is. These variables allow this extensibility where you can have any number of variables of what you want different from cluster to cluster in your environment. Because one of the hardest parts of managing Kubernetes is this tug of war of you want all your clusters to be provisioned the same way, and you want your platform to be cohesive and consistent, but you also need to be upgrading your tools and bringing new versions of tools in. And this cluster templating allows you to have full control and ownership of what tools you want in your clusters and what versions of those tools you want in your clusters. And we give you the tools to be able to build your own fleets. And that's how these clusters are being created. So you're not just getting, a cluster in the cloud. Like that wouldn't be very special. You could do that just with a Terraform command. What we're doing is we're building a cluster and then bootstrapping the cluster, automatically hooking the cluster into your GitOps ecosystem. So Argo CD is managing it, adding external secrets operator, hooking that external secrets operator into a new backend in your HashiCorp vault that will build the backend automatically for you so that you can naturally pull secrets easily into that new cluster. Like we take care of a lot of the tough edges of not just building clusters, but building a platform and building a platform in a way where the platform can be portable and multi-cloud. So when we were sort of going through the view of logged out.
Whilst you're going through that, I've got a question from Shiva again. I'll ask Jared this. So is there a way I can estimate the costs of the cluster or the surrounding infra that Kubefirst creates on a cloud provider in the same UI?
Waiting on Jared's voice.
He's on mute.
Yep, sorry. We don't have a tool that gives or like a table that breaks down the cost by cloud yet. I know that there's some tools like OpenCost we could probably install post Kubefirst creation that would give you a nice visual into how much, but I think they only support the big three clouds at last pulse, so I'm not sure what kind of insights you would get if you were operating in a smaller cloud. I don't have good numbers to say what the cost is. I bet you could slim down the cluster by a node if you're not super busy and big. But John, what do you think? Do you have a ballpark?
Yeah, I wish I came with numbers in my head. Just in terms of the size of the cluster, if you were to add an autoscaler to any of our management clusters in any of the clouds, they almost always pull the number of nodes down to 3 large nodes of whatever the standard large type is in whatever cloud it is. We give you the ability to change the infra though. So like you can change the instance types and how the autoscaler runs, or maybe you don't want an autoscaler at all and you just want to scale it out to 100 nodes because you have a big operation coming up. So because we're so flexible in the way that you run the infra and we don't know what you're going to put inside it, it's a little bit nebulous. But we run on 3 large nodes in the management cluster. Our default physical cluster is 2 nodes on a large and that's ample room. You can get away with just having a single node, but we always like having at least 2 nodes in a cluster. It's pretty inexpensive in the smaller clouds. It can start to get a little bit pricey in the bigger clouds, but that's sort of the nature of the clouds. I think Sivo is the cheapest cloud, and their control plane costs like only $5, I believe. And there's just a touch of additional expense beyond that. For
I think
the
I think control plane's free in SIBO.
oh, that's right, that's right.
I was about to say that.
What's
It's also like it's the big three are expensive, right? Because we need to give Bezos his next yacht.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because one yacht's
That's
not
right.
enough.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, So I think I'm just about done demoing, and we can get back into conversation. The last thing
Cool.
that I did want to throw on screen though is this GitOps catalog that we have. It's super neat. So we know that we're putting an opinionated platform forward, and we also know that we must build a platform where our end users are allowed to hate the tools that we've chosen, and they need to be able to replace them. They need to be able to swap them out. We're building the architecture with that in mind. We're also building the architecture with a concept in mind that there are more tools that we want you to use, but they're too opinionated to be right for everybody. Some examples of those are Caverno. Caverno is a great policy as code tool that if you have the bandwidth to support that type of governance, is really good to add to your ecosystem, and to add Caverno to the Kubefirst platform, for example. All you have to do is come over here, hit the install button, and like what a lot of marketplacey ecosystems do when you click a button like that is they start like helm installing into your cluster, and you lose track of it from a GitOps and desired state standpoint. But what we do when you install an app is we don't install that directly to your cluster. It works the exact same way the cluster management does. So if I go back to my GitOps repository, we'll see that just a second ago, there was a commit applied to the GitOps repo that adds Caverno policies and then a new Caverno instance into my management cluster. And because that's in the Git repo, that's how Argo CD wakes up and realizes, oh, I got work to do. They want another app in this cluster. And then Argo CD delivers it to your cluster. Kubefirst doesn't get into that business. So what the reason that that's so impactful is if you decided tomorrow that you're done with Kubefirst, you don't want to use Kubefirst anymore, you get to. You get to remove Kubefirst. And what you are left with is a GitOps Git repository that lives in your Git organization that's configured with a whole bunch of open source tools that you want to use anyway. And none of those tools are Kubefirst, and everything's working. Your infrastructure as code is well governed and automated with Atlantis, and you have all of your clusters that you created with Kubefirst are still clusters in your GitOps ecosystem and are still updatable, maintainable, manageable, editable. And you can just kind of take our patterns and run with it from there. So we've set up our end user to be very well protected. And we understand the investment that companies are making when they buy into a company for their infrastructure. It's the same type of decision that we all made when we decided that HashiCorp was a really good foundational tool that we should depend upon. We have that same sort of open source DNA about us. We want to make sure that we are always protecting the users that are using our infrastructure and our architecture. We've tried really hard to make sure that it sets our end users up for success that goes even beyond our own. So yeah, that's mostly what I wanted to show. We've got some other stuff. We application delivery. We come with a metaphor repository where it ships to dev stage prod as soon as you touch the main branch. We have any pull request that you make to a Terraform file It'll automatically run the plan for you, show you the plan in your pull request. And then you can just type Atlantis apply and it applies your changes for you. And the platform is as far along as you would expect it to be if you had a bunch of cloud native engineers working for 5.5 years without a software development team with a bunch of demand. So it's a really really good open source offering, and we're anxious to get new users and see how we're hitting the mark.
Yeah, it's great, right? I've got a bunch of questions that I want to rattle through, and then I'll open it up to anyone that's listening. So, starting with community first, what's the best way for new contributors to get started with Kubefirst?
You want to take that
I
one?
would. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would say to hop in our community Slack. That's the very best place to get started. There's a contributors channel in there. And if you mention that you're looking for something, I would start there. Fred and company will get back to you before you know it, and they'll be able to steer you towards good first issues. And then also, if you have your own contributions that you want to bring, that's a great place to start the conversation so that we can start working together on getting your contributions in.
And what
Yep.
type of contributions are you most looking for right now?
Ooh, that's tricky. Depends because everyone's needs are different. I don't know.
I have an answer. We want bugs. The best contribution that we could get right now at the spot that we're in is your feedback if anything is broken. We've been through this sort of brutal, if I can be so honest. Like the first 5 years of our project were we didn't have enough engineers for our aspirations. And for the first time in our company's history, we have enough people to get the job done that we're trying to do. What that means is we're trying to fill every single gap that we've left behind. At any bug anywhere, if we know about it starting now, it won't reintroduce. We just need that feedback that something isn't working somewhere from anyone. And I think that's probably our most valuable contribution that we could ask for right now. We've had contributors though come in and literally give us full clouds, which I will not say that that's not valuable. Also, that's incredibly valuable to get an entire cloud user base added to the platform is enormous to us. We're always looking for opportunities like that. But even at the most basic, like, hey, I ran into a bug, that is extremely valuable to us. So
Yeah, real user feedback, right? So you can
yeah.
build out and fix the issues, and makes sense. What exciting features are on the roadmap that you can talk about?
Oh, yeah.
Let me
I don't
wind
know.
up Jared. Jared, take it away.
No. You said that we can talk about. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's really Colony is just introducing a whole new space for us that's really exciting. It's been really nice to get into the bare metal side of things and have the ability to start kind of understanding how data centers work. And getting Kubefirst, the management platform in data centers, is probably one of the things I'm most excited about. I could complain about a lot of things I'd like to fix, but that's not nearly as exciting as getting Kubefirst in data centers. I think that gives us a nice, it affords us the ability to start naturally extending into public clouds from your data center. So you can host your management control plane in that data center, and then provision the workloads and the resources in the cloud that you want to lean on, all managed through infrastructure as code and in a repeatable way that takes a long time to do otherwise. So just feel like we were fighting the good battle with Kubernetes years ago, and it's gotten much better through all the managed services and everything else. The bare metal space still feels like it's like 3 or 4 years behind schedule of the rest of the cloud space. So it's nice to see that coming through.
Yeah.
Watch this space. We'll have to get you guys back on for Colony Project Spotlight at some point.
Oh, that'd be
Yeah,
so cool. That'd be so cool.
Yeah, would love to.
So where do you see Kubefirst in a year from now? So let's say like at the end of 2025.
Kubefirst a year
Dare
from
to
now.
dream.
I know. I definitely see it being a de facto way to have a instant hybrid cloud and instant multi-cloud. It was real hard to get a platform that we could install the same way to AWS as GCP, as Azure, as Civo, as DigitalOcean. Now that we have those tools in our toolbox, like, it just doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how we're going to be able to say, okay, pick a cloud that you want to start in. And then we should be able to just extend into any number of clouds from a multi-cloud standpoint. Or you don't even have to start out in a cloud because of what we're doing with Colony. We'll be able to start you out in your data center and just allow you to use the cloud as a way to extend your infrastructure into clouds. And there's just some cool stories that come out of that. Like, in AWS right now, you can't get on-demand GPU workloads. You'll get ice there. They'll tell you can, but you're not going to get them. You'll run the Terraform, and the Terraform will tell you can't have any.
It's because Anthropic's taking them all.
Yeah, and if you're an AWS shop, like, and on-demand GPUs are valuable to you, on the Kubefirst platform, you can just go boop and say, well, I want a Civo GPU cluster now from my AWS management ecosystem. And Civo has on-demand GPUs available that you can just tap into and bind into your DNS ecosystem as if it was a native part of your AWS cloud. And so there's going to be some things that the different clouds do really well. And we want to find the right ways to sort of bring the best of what the clouds deliver to a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment that is actually useful and usable and has a good user experience. Because that's like the hard part. I've worked at a whole bunch of shops that had to explore multi-cloud, and it just seemed like it was an act of God that was needed to get the job accomplished and have it be managed
And about $1 million budget.
Yeah, I know.
Starting, that's the first 6 months, right?
So
yeah, and like to just be able to boop, boop, boop and say, DigitalOcean, AWS, and my private data center. I hope that's where we are by this time next year.
Watch this space. I'm rooting for you guys. I've known you guys for a while, right? On the conference scene, so you know that it's all love from this side.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. So you're probably familiar that we have a tradition on the show where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest, not necessarily knowing who they are or what they're going to talk about. So Paolo and Lukasz from the Strimzy project asked, what real-world challenges have you encountered when adopting a cloud-native architecture, and how did you address them?
Yeah, take it, Jared. Go for it.
And I'll start. I think really this is kind of a weird answer. It feels like a weird answer, but hopefully it makes sense. I think the people are the hardest part of adopting a cloud native architecture. It's not the technology anymore. When you have an organization that's been running in virtual machine land for the last half decade, convincing them that it's a good idea to change everything to containerized software or containerized technologies and move into Kubernetes and blah, blah, blah. That you hit the organizational wall before you hit the people, or like the technology wall. Everything is there for the taking today in cloud native. It's just whether or not your organization will make that step and actually commit to it, because usually turns out to be some spike area and it's never given attention, and it's just a thing that happens on the side. And if you just commit and bite the bullet, I think it's easier to do and accomplish.
Yep. Imagine this one though, Steve. So we're in the middle of this grassroots nights and weekends thing that we're trying to do, right, Jared and I, and we're probably about a half a year into this, and we're feeling like we're freaking close. We're real close. Like, we're so close that 2 a.m. is happening every single day, day after day, day after day, right? And then we discovered GitOps. Sugar. that was a big problem for us.
Mind blown.
Yeah, we were. We loved Argo CD already. We were only using it as a tool to organize and visualize apps, so that you could kind of see what apps were in your cluster, but we didn't fully appreciate like just how far GitOps can go. And when it clicked, we had to decide, should we throw out the last half year of nights and weekends work that we've been building and re-architect? And we ended up making the super hard decision that, yeah, it's time to throw this project away and start over on GitOps. And we're so glad we did. It was a really heavy bet after a lot of grind. And when we felt like we were so close, and we went backward in time about 4 months to try to re-architect on top of GitOps, and no regrets on that decision. And it's, to this day, we still do not deviate from GitOps anywhere. We have it
Yeah,
pretty
I
much
think it's something that, not like, I respect you massively for doing that, right? It's something that we don't do as an industry enough, which is look
Yeah.
behind us and actually question whether the path we've trod is the right path, or whether actually we should just go back to the beginning again. And that's that's expensive, but actually it could be more expensive just continuously going forward, and actually turning around and looking at the path that you trod, and was it the correct path? Did we, have we backed ourselves into a corner, or is there a better route? Right. Sometimes a scooter is better than a motorcycle, right? But we have to.
Yeah, for sure. On the right path.
Yeah, it depends if you're on the pavement, then you're going to have to use a scooter. You can't use a motorcycle. Yep. So yeah, I give you props for that. I think not enough people do that in the industry. So before we wrap up, I've asked you guys a bunch of questions. Do you have any questions for me?
Ooh. Yeah, Steve, how do you deal with diversity? How do you deal with an impossible challenge? It's part of our story. It's just being met with impossible challenges and doing it anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? This is like a classic consultant answer, but I actually do truly believe it, which is like, no challenge is an impossible challenge. You just need to break it down into constituent pieces that are easy enough to figure out, right? And I talk a lot when I'm consulting with companies about how you have a train, and a train is made up of multiple carriages. If you take the assumption that some of those carriages are well defined, and as you go further along, some of those carriages are less well defined. But if you can break that long train up into multiple sets of smaller carriages, where you can understand whether you move to the next carriage or whether you need to construct another train, keeping the train analogy, let's see how confusing we can make this. It allows you to be able to make small bets that you understand. And then in regards to looking behind you, you can look behind you and make sure, was that the right decision? Was that the right decision? Because some challenges, like you're saying, right, are just so vast that we can't possibly think about them in one go. But actually, if we break them down into like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 different small challenges that are relatively well defined, we know whether we're traveling in the right direction or not. So I spend a lot of time with customers, like taking their humongous idea, which sounds like a huge challenge, and actually breaking it down into smaller constituent pieces, whereby essentially each of them have a go, no-go decision of whether we keep moving forward on this train or whether it's time to build a new one.
Yep. Right. Yep. It's good advice, Steve. So do I get to ask a question to the next audience member? Is that how this works?
You do, but we're now not doing it that you actually verbalize it on the stream. Otherwise they get too much time to think about it. So I will email you and we'll get one.
All right. I'll have my Thanksgiving themed question ready.
Pecan pie or pumpkin pie?
It could be anything. Could be anything.
So yeah, we're reaching time, so I want to wrap up. It's been great having you guys on, right? I spoke to you guys in person before, but actually sitting down and talking about Kubefirst and seeing the demo, it's awesome, right? I've seen it before, but it's come on leaps and bounds since I last saw it, and that was only a couple of months ago. So what I love about these conversations is how it shows like these cloud native projects isn't just about the code, right? We're talking to the people that are behind it, right? And we're coming together and solving real world problems. And I think you really are solving one, right? I spend all my time in platform engineering. I've been building these platforms many, many, many times across many, many, many clouds. And like, you're helping solve a real problem where we can kind of, you're taking us to like 8 and then it's essentially we build on top of that to like, create S3 buckets, create DynamoDB tables, whatever we need to be able to run our specific workloads. And I think that's great, right? It's all about making that little part of that puzzle boring, and then allowing you to add the business value, which is the bit that you should be doing, right? No one wants to be doing all of this because it takes so much time, and we end up bootstrapping hundreds and hundreds of clusters, and we don't want to be doing that. So I think props to you guys, and like the passion and commitment that you've shown is awesome.
Thank you so much, Steve. No, thank you for having us on the show too. One of the biggest challenges that we have we had this idea, right, Jared and I. It's so naive. You think back 5.5 years ago, and we're like, hey, let's go change the industry, right? High fives, right? And we'll do it all for free, and we'll do it all open source, and we're just going to give it away. We'll solve the toughest problem in computing, and we'll give it away to the world for free. And so we work all night, and we work all month, and we work all year, and then we finally have this thing, and then we open source the thing, and we put a blog together, and it's time to show it to the world, and everything's about to catch fire, and you post your blog post, and then you have the realization that you're a drop in an ocean of cloud native on an enormous internet that has a scale that you just couldn't possibly comprehend. And it takes a little bit to realize that relationships like the one we have with you, Steve, is paramount to getting your message out. And so we can't thank you enough for having us on your show, giving us an opportunity to kind of tell the world about our open source initiative, putting a little bit of it on screen. And for anyone in your audience that feels 3/4 tempted, come on in. We have, I swear, the best, most brilliant team in the world. We have support that will blow your mind. And it doesn't matter if you have a stupid question, if you have a question that makes you feel like a noob, you're exactly the person that we want to be talking to and helping along. We know exactly how it feels. So we hope you'll join our community and hop in, and we'll help you along,
Yeah, and like a couple of things to that, right? If you want to get involved, Konstruct.io/Kubefirst, Konstruct with a K. I'll make sure that we put that in the show notes, and I'll put both your guys' Twitter on there so that they can bombard you with tweets, and you can forward them to the Slack channel. Yeah, and I always say, right, the only question that's a stupid question is the one that you don't ask, because you'll never actually.
That's right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But yeah, and until next time, I'm Steve Wade. This has been Kubefirst Cloud Native Project Spotlight. Keep building, keep learning, and keep sharing. See you next week. Bye all.
Thanks, everyone.
See you, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.